A big thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this week's video. If you need a website or a domain, go to squarespace.com/James for 10% off your first purchase. Sorry, I was miles away then. Right, I have filmed a photography video this week, or part of a photography video, which I'll get to in a minute. But first, I wanted to talk a little bit about cameras and a thought that woke me up a couple of nights ago and that I've struggled to shake ever since. So it probably won't shock you to hear that I have lots of conversations in my life about cameras, and a couple of things come up a lot when I'm talking to people about cameras. First is cost, probably unsurprisingly. If you're a photographer, you've probably noticed that cameras are very expensive. And I think, relative to other tech verticals at least, cameras represent not particularly good value for money. And maybe that's a whole video in and of itself. But the other thing that comes up quite a lot when I'm talking to people about cameras is the concept of compromise. And compromise tends to work in one of two ways. Either you don't get the features that you want in a camera, or you do get lots and lots of features in a camera, some of which you have absolutely no use for, and you have to pay for those features because they come bundled with other features that you did want. Case in point, my Sony a7R5, a camera that I'm growing to like more and more with each passing week that I use it. I've had this for the best part of 2 years now. I've shot with it on 6 continents, and I'm liking it and respecting it more and more because in that time it has never let me down and it gets out of my way. Very, very good camera this, but it's not perfect for me and my needs, and it never could have been because it wasn't made for me. It was made for the needs of lots and lots of people, broadly speaking. So yeah, great camera, I love the sensor, but for instance, I could have done without the 9 million dot EVF. Is it 9 million? 9.44 million dots. Yeah, and I mean, it's beautiful, but I don't need it. So long as I can broadly see what it is that I'm shooting, that's fine. So for instance, I could have done with the EVF that's in the Sony a7 IV that I'm shooting this video on now. How many's that got? 3.6 million dots. Absolutely fine. Now, Sony has lots of cameras on the market. So if I wanted this sensor with a less impressive EVF, I could have gone for the Sony, what's that one called? Sony a7CR. Different body type, but yes, 60 megapixel sensor. But then I wouldn't have had this amazing screen that sort of tips in every single direction you can imagine. And I wouldn't have had 2 card slots. And there are 2 kinds of photographers in the world, those who've had data losses and those who haven't. And I've had cards corrupt, so I always want to shoot with redundancy. Anyway, long story short, compromise. But it's not the case when you buy lots of other kinds of products. You don't necessarily have to compromise in the same ways. If you buy a car or a kitchen or a laptop, then you don't tend to see a price when you're buying those things. You might see a price that has 2 words before it saying something like starting from. And of course the implication there is that you buy a base product and then you tailor it to your needs with upgrades. And over the past couple of days, I've been wondering why it is that the camera market doesn't operate in this way at all. And yet, as I say, when you buy a laptop, you can choose a screen that has less glare, you can choose the amount of memory, you can choose the amount of power it has. So why is that not the case with cameras? And you're looking at me thinking, James, you're so naive. That's not the case because it would be less profitable. And maybe you're right. Maybe it would be a lot less profitable for camera companies to sell you cameras that are literally tailored to and perfect for your exact needs. But I do think we've got to a point with cameras now where we're at the sharp end of innovation, and that with each new release, we're seeing more and more features that people aren't asking for. And I could count on one hand the number of people I've met who have any interest in 8K video or shooting at over 100 frames a second or wanting all of those shots to be in focus. And it strikes me, just as a question to the industry, would we not be better off building stuff that gave customers more control over what it is they wanted rather than them having to buy these cameras that had all kinds of stuff that they didn't want? And yeah, maybe I'm just being really naive and perhaps that would make these camera companies a lot less money. But imagine the size of first mover advantage if one of the companies did this. Imagine if Sony, rather than selling 10 cameras at once that all try to broadly cater to different people, imagine they just sold one body and you could just spec it however you liked. And imagine a business model where the done thing was to get a new sensor when you wanted a new sensor, rather than a whole new camera. You know, imagine that existed for Sony, for instance, but the other manufacturers were just selling cameras still off the shelf that kind of only broadly met people's needs. I think a lot of people would switch to the manufacturer that was offering a completely bespoke service. Anyway, yeah, maybe I'm just dreaming, but it seems like lots of other industries do this. And so I'm wondering, or have been over the past couple of days, why the camera industry doesn't do this at all. Anyway, there's a thought, just putting it into the world. Here's some photography. Ooh, the light's back. Don't go. It's gone again. Never mind. Hopefully it'll be back. Oh, it is back. Anyway, hello everybody. Welcome back to Wales and to an exact spot that you might recognise from a video late last year. Keeps coming and going. Anyway, a couple of weeks back, I was in the French Alps. Seems a bit of a random detail in that context, but let me explain. I was there predominantly for a family holiday, and I dabbled with the idea of making a video, but it didn't really go to plan because I'm an idiot. Please stay. Long story short, I forgot a tripod plate, so I ended up trying to balance a little camera on my snowboard to do some filming. Anyway, while I was in France, I met up with a photographer I've wanted to meet up with for a long time, Ben Adams. I'm sure lots of you follow him on Instagram. His profile is below. And Ben, I think it's fair to say, is predominantly a film photographer, and he does some amazing work in the Chamonix area of the French Alps and elsewhere. And the day that I met up with Ben, he was shooting a couple of rolls of black and white film. And it was really interesting to watch him work, so much so that when I got back to my hotel, I was looking at some of the photos I'd taken on that trip in the French Alps, and I tried converting them to black and white and playing around with the editing of those photos in black and white. Today is one step further in that process. Basically, I've come out with the intention of shooting solely in black and white. Kind of. I've got a get out clause, which is that I'm shooting raw. So I'm capturing the colour. It's there if I want it. But I've set my Sony profile, whatever it's called, bear with me, my creative look, to black and white, and I've upped the contrast of that profile. And yeah, we'll just see how we go, see what I capture. I should say I have lived an incredibly sheltered life when it comes to black and white. I don't recall ever really shooting black and white because colour, I think, is integral to the way that I like to work. I've spoken on this channel before about my concept of what I call thin glass, which essentially is my attempt, emphasis on the word attempt as well, to show the world in my photos in much the same way that you would see it. That's why I shoot at normal focal lengths, normal in quotation marks there. It's why I don't use ND filters to blur water and skies. It's why I shoot at head height pretty much all the time. And it's why I shoot in colour, because most of us are fortunate enough to see the world in colour. So yes, this is a bit of a departure for me, and I'm cheating, to be honest. I've come to a landscape which is, let's face it, mostly black and white, but it's baby steps, so I thought I'd come somewhere that I think will be easy to shoot in black and white first. That may be proved wrong. Like I say, I've not really shot black and white. I've no idea what I'm doing, so this could be a terrible video. It's probably the time to say, if you've got something better to do, maybe go and do that. I don't know how that'll come out, but the shadows of the cloud up against the rock look pretty cool. Oh, I made the mistake of looking at the calendar and seeing it was early March and thinking that spring had sprung. Nope, it's freezing. Come on, light. The light is proving pretty much crucial, I would say, which stands to reason when you're shooting black and white, because contrast is king, I think, when you shoot in black and white. Although, like I say, I've hardly ever done this before, so what do I know? But basically here, when the light is shining, you get these black caverns anywhere that there's a doorway. And I think that helps add some intrigue and sort of helps clean up the mess of the image, because there's also lots of texture here. So yeah, waiting around for the light seems to be the name of the game. I'm trying to work out exactly how much I'm enjoying this. And I think I am enjoying it. I mean, I'd like the wind to go away, but yeah, I'm having fun. Admittedly, if I was somewhere where there was lots of colour, I'd have probably given up a long time ago and I'd be shooting colour, because in some ways I do miss shooting colour. Even somewhere like this where there isn't any. And I've only been going 2.5 hours. But here, or in places like this, it's, yeah, I am enjoying myself. And I think I will continue to enjoy myself shooting black and white in places like this in future. They feel like entirely different things, shooting black and white and colour. And again, I don't know what I'm talking about because I've been shooting black and white for 2.5 hours, but yeah, they are different skills. You're looking for different things. Contrast mainly, shooting black and white, it seems to me. But somewhere like this does work really well for it. I think that was a bit of an eye-opener as a process. I did quite enjoy myself, and I didn't mind the editing process either. I've kind of always thought, oh, but I love editing colour, and I do love editing colour. But when you're editing black and white, you of course do still get to edit colour, you just don't get to edit saturation. You're dealing with purely the luminance of the colours instead, which does have its own charm. So perhaps black and white photography is something that I'll pay more attention to going forward. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully it was interesting. And thank you also for listening to my naive ideas at the start of the video. I've written a blog post on my website detailing some of those ideas if you felt I didn't make any sense. So go and check that out if you wish. It is on my Squarespace website, and a huge thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. I've also uploaded a couple of the photos I shot in France onto my portfolio page. And if you're looking for somewhere online to showcase your work, I can't recommend Squarespace enough. You don't need to know a single line of code. It's very simple to use, and you control it entirely through the use of templates, through the use of things like sliders, all very simple to understand. And I think it operates as a really powerful tool for showing your work. So whether you want an online store or a blog or just somewhere to show your portfolio, Squarespace is a great solution. And you can start a free trial at Squarespace by going to squarespace.com. And after that, if you'd like to make a purchase, just go to squarespace.com/James and you'll get 10% off your first purchase. So a big thank you to Squarespace for their continued support of this channel. And thank you to you for watching. I'll be back soon, probably shooting in colour. But I did enjoy myself. I'll see you next time. Cheers.